Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, this time to build, this time to build, this time, this time to build, this time to build, this time to build, this time, power, this time to build, power, this time to build, power, this time to build, power.
What's up, everybody? I am your host, Chris Hampton. Welcome to episode 74 of the Power Company Podcast, brought to you, as always, by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. I am currently here in Lander, Wyoming, but packing up and getting ready to head down to Denver for the Outdoor Retailer Trade Show, which frankly is screwing with my training schedule a little, and that's a little bit frustrating, but I do have some great guests lined up for down there and some good meetings, so it's going to be worth it. And you guys will obviously know about those guests relatively soon. And speaking of my training schedule, it's been really nice to be back into a routine and start feeling strong again. And I wanted to say a special thanks to our patrons who not only support this thing, but are helping keep me accountable in my own training. It means a lot to have that. And I've been documenting my process over there with extra episodes. We've talked about where I'm at, the assessments and measurements I've gone through. And then today I'll be divulging the nerdy details of my extra simplified training plan with them. And we'll be talking through it, and I'll be giving them progress updates or regress updates. I don't know what it's going to be. Hopefully they keep holding me accountable and it's progress. That's what I'm counting on. And if you're interested in following along, as well as extras from our guests, Q&As, and more, you can head over to patreon.com/powercompanypodcast and join in. And for as little as $1 a month, up to whatever you think this podcast is worth, you can help support what we're building. And we appreciate that. Thank you. Today's guest, Justin Salas, is an interesting case. I drove down to Denver to meet with Justin several weeks ago and to climb with him. And Justin's a blind climber. And I say that not wanting to define him that way, because that's not what it is. Justin's a climber, and he climbs really, really well. And he puts a lot of thought into how to climb and how to climb around, and I guess using his lack of sight. And it's really interesting to watch. And if you just met Justin, in a climbing gym or whatever, wherever, you'd be pretty hard pressed to know that he's blind right off the bat. He's not completely blind, but nearly. And knowing that fact makes it even harder to sort of reconcile this idea that Justin's blind and he climbs this well. But that's our own misconceptions. That's our own ideas and just a misunderstanding. So it was a really cool session for me to get to watch Justin and see Justin and try to understand how he processes things. And then talking through it afterward was fascinating. So if I keep talking now, I'm going to tell you the whole interview. So instead of that, I'm just going to jump into this with Justin Salas.
And so when you feel that hold, you're not just feeling the hold. You start noticing all these little subtleties more so than just like looking at a rock climb and thinking, hold.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I definitely asked a lot of questions while we were out there and you were crushing me on the tension board.
Right.
And I think a lot of those questions are things that people should know. So I'm going to do some backtracking for sure.
Sounds good. Yeah.
But so just to tell everybody how I kind of got hooked up with you and a little bit about your story. My friend Tim Foote messaged me and said, hey, I was just in Scotland, and I was shooting this event, and there was this guy there who is crushing, and he's blind. And I was like, well, explain that a little bit,
Right, sure.
And I looked into you and was like, whoa, I have to, I need to reach out to this kid. So,
Right.
in fact, I remember pulling over off the highway and sending you a message I think on Instagram or Facebook, one of the two. Like, hey, let's figure out when we're going to be in the same place at the same time, because I'd love to get you on the podcast.
Yeah, I remember getting that email and being like, no way. Power company's trying to do a podcast? I was pretty blown away. Been listening to the show for quite some time now and was really psyched. So cool. I thought it'd be really cool to get the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you doing it. Like
absolutely.
Being so stoked to do it. So tell us a little bit about your story. You're not completely blind, but you're legally blind,
right?
And how did that come about? You weren't born blind, so when did that happen?
Yeah, so I lost most of my vision when I was around the age of 14. It ended up taking quite a turn when I was 13. I had an MRSA staph infection, which was hard to adjust. I had about a year in between this surgery to remove this infection from my hip to losing my vision. So it was already kind of a start. And then started losing my vision around the middle of my 14 years. And then as soon as, it's probably in the summer, I started noticing a change. Started noticing a little bit of a shift in my vision. Like, I remember looking at the moon and thinking, like, looks kind of strange. Like, there's a spot missing from it. Just little things here and there. I remember riding my bike in my town with a friend of mine, and there was this huge sign. It must have been, it was the size of a building. It was a massive furniture store sign.
Right.
We were riding by it. I always knew what it looked like. I always knew what it said. And I told my friend, hey, dude, I can't see that sign anymore. And he kind of laughed and was like, whatever, dude. Like, that thing's huge, And I was just, we didn't even think too much of it, to be honest, because, I didn't think, I didn't really know what was going on. Maybe I just needed glasses or something like that.
Right.
Continued on. That was the first time I really noticed something happening. And then it just continued to get worse. I'd have better days and I'd have worse days. And then eventually it got to a point where I was like, Mom, I need to go to the eye doctor again. Like, something's really strange here.
Yeah.
I remember the eye doctor being like, yeah, something's funny going on here, because you're pretty normal to begin with, and now you're seeing around 2200 visual acuity, which is around about where the phrase legally blind comes from.
Right.
Because you can be under that and still considered like pretty all right. Like, they can give you glasses and you'll be driving in no time and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
But as soon as you hit like 2200, you're considered legally blind, and that was the start of it. It continued to get worse well after all that, and they ran all the tests in the book. I think I went to a dozen doctors, all kinds of specialists, CAT scans, MRIs, contrast scans, a whole bunch, the whole 9 yards. I think I even had a specialist tell me it was stress. Right. He said, go home, de-stress.
De-stress while you're going blind. Yeah,
exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I told him, well, I'm stressed because I'm going blind. Something's wrong here, And they said they didn't know what it was, but it's not going to get any better, basically.
Oh, man.
They said you'll never go completely blind, like no vision at all, but they don't know how bad it'll get.
So is it still deteriorating?
Yeah.
You can tell year to year that it's changing?
I wouldn't say year to year. I would say it's taken, I've been visually impaired now for 10 years, and it's only decreased a little bit. It's pretty leveled off at this point.
Gotcha. And at that point, I think it's probably tough to even tell when it's deteriorating when it happens.
Yeah, it's like it's
slowly,
all bad.
Yeah, it's like, I have 20-year-old daughter, and watching her grow up when I see her every day is harder to notice that she's growing up.
Right.
Until I see a photo from 3 years ago and I'm like, holy shit.
Right.
You know,
for sure.
so it's probably tough to tell if it's happening.
Yeah, it's
slowly.
like at some point when it gets as bad as it has gotten for me, I think I'm hovering around like having 90% of my vision gone out of the center of my vision.
Right.
My peripheral vision still works a little bit. It's a little bit worse than like an average person's, but at some point it all kind of blends together.
Right. So what can you see in the center of your vision? Are you seeing light and shadow? Are you can you make out form and shape?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's like, I called it entropy for the longest time.
Right.
I guess I still call it entropy, but it's essentially like if you were to, like the old TV, some of the younger people may not remember this, but like if you were to yank those analog cables out of the back of a TV.
See, I go way before cables were in the back of your TV. So
yeah, I'm still kind of right in the middle of those. But yeah, if you were to yank those cables out of the back of a TV and it goes gray and
everything went fuzzy.
Yeah. It's like multicolored in some sort of strange way, even though you're kind of seeing this grayscale fuzziness. It's like that.
Gotcha.
I basically can't see anything through it except for like if I get really close to something, I can kind of like see lines and contrast and shapes through it. But I mean, maybe a little bit of light, but for the most part, it's like almost completely gone.
And then how much, or can you even put a number or percentage on it? How much of your peripheral vision is there, and how good is that peripheral vision?
I mean, it's pretty normal to, at least from what I can remember, being what I used to be able to see.
Right.
I mean, obviously you can't read like a book out of your peripheral, and it's pretty reactionary based. I think that's why I kind of come off as someone who can see so well, because when you have your peripheral, you can kind of still navigate pretty efficiently.
Sure. Yeah.
And like even when someone were if someone were to throw something at me from my side, I flinch because I can see an object moving.
Right.
And so it's I kind of put off this vibe like I can see until inevitably I run into a wall or something like that.
You do put off that vibe for sure. and I bet that's disarming a little bit for a lot of people.
Right.
Like I think oftentimes like normal, I don't even know how to phrase it, but a lot of times people they act differently.
Right, for sure.
Around blind people or deaf people or, people who have whatever impairments.
Right.
And my guess is that you don't get as much of that because you do come off as someone who sees just normally.
Right.
Like it doesn't, if no one had told me, if I didn't know that you were blind when you were walking in, I'd have had no idea.
For sure. Yeah, it's almost a two-edged sword though, because I can put off that vibe and people can think I'm like perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Until I come into a situation where it's like, I need to actually explain.
Sure.
And then they're just kind of like, bullshit, dude.
Right.
Like,
right.
Like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
real.
no, I'm serious. Like, I need help here. And it happens sometimes when we're outside. I'll be climbing with just one other friend and maybe he'll go off, to another block or something like that.
Oh, right.
And I'll have memorized the route, but I'll be trying, it's kind of low ball, I don't necessarily need a spotter, but I'm trying this. And then, for some reason I'll miss a hand or miss a foot and they're just kind of like, okay,
right.
How did you, it's huge, it's got a huge tick on it. How did you miss that? And I'm like, oh, could you guide me to this foot? And they're like, okay. And then I have to start explaining it to them.
Yeah.
And
that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really strange. And then they're just kind of like, yeah, and you almost don't get taken seriously. And it happens a lot, if I'm in a store or something like that. And I'm kind of like looking at things and I can't see what's going on. And then I go to pay for it and I can't see the machine or all this jazz. And then they're just like pretty taken aback by it, I guess. So
yeah.
I've even had like some negative reactions where people are just like almost turned off, like I'm trying to be
you're
mean.
Fucking with them or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah, it's really
that's
weird.
a tricky thing to navigate.
So like at the School for the Blind, they'll teach you to always have your cane with you. So I always have my cane with me, but I don't
Gotcha.
always get it out. But like if I'm crossing a street or like off on a solo mission just around town, I'll get
Yeah.
my cane out, even though I don't need it necessarily to like get
Sure.
around.
Yep.
I still need people to understand that like something's different for me. Like I
that's
can't see the
really-
world the same way you do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really interesting. So when did climbing come into the picture?
Yeah. So climbing started, I think, pretty early on. I think I've always really known what climbing is. A friend of mine started working at the local climbing gym maybe a year to 6 months into losing my vision. But at the time I had still I wasn't trying to give up everything that I once did, things like BMX and soccer and paintball and stuff like that.
Right.
So I was really focused on trying to still master these things, trying to go through the process of adapting, so to say. And then, he continually was like, come to the climbing gym. You don't
Right,
need to see
right.
to climb, all this stuff.
Because when you have the bug, you want everyone else to catch the bug.
No,
too.
yeah, I'm doing the same thing now. Come on, just try it. And so eventually, reluctantly, I went with him.
Yeah.
And I had a blast. It was really cool. But early on back then, the gym was really expensive because they weren't doing monthly memberships. So it was kind of a yearly thing.
Right.
They ended up, I mean, it was way too expensive for me to afford, me or my family to afford. So kind of just tossed it by the wayside. But I found out later on that a lot of the guys that were going to that gym were not paying anything.
Yep. I think everyone just kind of set for their memberships back then. And,
absolutely. Yeah, but I of course didn't know that, so I was
Sure.
like, yeah, whatever. So I went back to doing whatever it is that I was doing at the time, and then eventually, I don't exactly remember how we kind of circled back to climbing, but it was two friends of mine and I. We were pretty outdoors orientated people. We liked hiking and backpacking, camping, all that jazz. We ended up going back to the gym just to try it out, and I was just hooked. I don't know
How
what
far had your vision gone at that point?
it was like as bad as it is now.
Right.
I had gotten pretty used to my vision at this point, and I was pretty comfortable with it, always knowing that, my buddy Nick would always told me you didn't need to see to climb. And so I think I didn't appreciate it back then. I guess I just didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but, coming back with a fresh mindset and kind of wanting to try it more for myself, it was like this light bulb went off, like, holy shit, you really don't need to be able to see to climb,
Yeah. So I have to ask, when you're and I'm asking this because we were just in what I think I can safely say is probably the best situation for you. Where where there's bright lights below the hold and it's a contrasting grid so you can kind of tell where the holds are placed.
Oh yeah. Very symmetrical.
Yeah.
Easy to memorize.
Yeah. So in a regular commercial gym, how does that work? I imagine you probably started out just by grabbing whatever holds are there, but pretty quickly it comes to, I want to do specific problems. So how did that work right off the bat?
Yeah.
How did it not get so frustrating that you were like, fuck this?
Right. Well, it was interesting because, I think I almost started in an ideal gym for someone transitioning from a non-rock climber to a rock climber to not only that, but being visually impaired or blind. And then thinking man, our walls really aren't that tall. I think our soul bouldering room, the tallest wall we have is 10 feet, but it's overhanging, so it's not very tall at all. Think TBA small.
Right.
And so it wasn't too bad for me to start memorizing these things. And I would just ask people around me, hey, what color are these? Is this black tape, white tape, red tape, all that jazz. And eventually I just kind of remembered the sequences. And so, I was obsessed. I would go 6 days a week and just thrash myself.
Right,
I just
right.
couldn't get enough of like what was happening. I stopped doing really everything else, like BMX and all that stuff that I mentioned. And just like solely devoted myself to climbing. And it was funny because the two guys that I went with kind of expected us to all three go at the same time. Like that was the bro day, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I lived so close to the climbing gym that I was, you know, when I wasn't at the gym, I was bored. So I was just like, can I get a ride to the gym? Or I would like call another climber that I met, had no idea who he was, but I was like, you guys want to go climbing? And everyone was always psyched.
You were that annoying kid who was always bugging everybody to go to the gym.
Yeah, you know, imagine what those guys were thinking. Oh, this blind guy wants to go rock climbing, you know? And so, yeah, I ended up just like spending, you know, most days of the week there and getting to know a bunch of people and all the route setters. And eventually I learned like a way for myself to climb kind of on my own and learning our walls, all the different grips, and kind of like almost like memorizing what certain colors looked like on certain walls so that I could, you know, for sure think like, okay, if we're climbing on R35 wall, blue looks like this on this wall, or red looks like this on this wall.
Right.
And so eventually I was kind of able to figure something out that worked well for me.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if it was like too much for me to figure out, I would ask somebody. And so that kind of developed into me basically just spending most of my days bouldering. I didn't really like rope climbing. I didn't really have much of a rope climbing partner, but I just found it way more taxing to go with a partner, have him call out all these different holds.
Right.
Way more to memorize. And then, so I just, you know, picked up bouldering because I fell in love with like the hard moves, pure movement, cool sequences, a lot more like crazy stuff that suits my kind of more physical style of climbing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was kind of after that a matter of figuring out like, man, if I don't have very many holds on the wall, there's not a lot to memorize. So it almost lended itself more towards like hard climbing than easy climbing. Because if it's an easy route or an easy boulder, there's tons, it's just shotgunned with holds or feet.
Right.
And I prefer not having very many of those. So it's just like, yeah, go from this hold to this hold and then that hold to the finish hold or something like that.
Right.
And so I progressed pretty quickly because it saved energy for me to stay on these shorter, harder boulders than get on a rope and climb an easy thing that I would get pumped out on early on. Mm-hmm. So early on I had like no stamina.
Well, you know, and I imagine that by bouldering and having the luxury of, you know, falling off and being able to start over or try a different problem, and throughout a night, you know, 6 days a week in the gym, you're doing thousands of different moves.
Oh yeah.
So you're building up this movement library much faster than someone who starts on TR and is pretty much just climbing a ladder of jugs for the first, you know, however long.
And I'd say even for me, it's like, it's almost like file cabineting these moves, if you can call that a thing.
Yeah. I was curious about that, and I want to get into that a little bit after I kind of hear about how climbing all took shape, because I think it's super interesting how you must catalog all these moves together and memorize the precision of all these moves. Right. You know, but so do you have regular partners now? Are there guys that go out with you normally that kind of understand what it is you need when you're outside or when you're in the gym or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. Most of the guys that I climb with at the gym nowadays are like, we all kind of climb at the same level, so to say. So some of the guys definitely are way stronger than I am, but I'd say like, because of my visual impairment, it almost lended itself to getting stronger quicker, because I have to pause in between all these hard moves, and I have to I'll lock off on these small holds for a lot longer than a sighted person that can just like go to this bad edge, and then as soon as they hit that edge, it's like they can immediately see where to go afterwards. But I'll hit that bad edge and, you know, look up, nothing's there, so I have to like look around and find the feet, and then wait for someone eventually, or if I'm by myself, feel around.
Yeah, watching you on the tension board tonight, you climb with a really relaxed tension and a lot of tension. Like you can definitely see that. I mean, you're a sloth climber. We talked about that a little bit.
Super sloth.
And I'm a sloth as well. So, we were like kindred spirits out there.
Oh, yeah.
Not wanting to jump. But I don't want to jump because it just doesn't suit me well.
Right.
Jumping for you, I imagine there's another component to moving with momentum and moving dynamically where I can see the hold I'm trying to latch.
Right.
And especially the first time you're going to a hold, going dynamically is always a blind move for you.
Always, yeah. It's a lot of fun.
I mean, we talk about, there's this blind throw.
Yeah.
But it's always a blind throw for
Always a blind throw.
And that's terrifying to me.
Yeah, it's like this kind of, I remember for the longest time, like even when I lost my vision, I would still go longboarding, like downhill longboarding, and I would just follow a friend or like riding my bike. And like BMX culture, you don't ride with brakes for bar spins and things like that to make it easier. And so I'm like trusting my friends to like do this and to bomb these hills and all this stuff.
I don't have any friends I trust that much.
But when you're kind of forced, you're just like, I'll trust everybody. So you find yourself gullible, just like, you should try this, or like, oh, it's not that bad. You got it. I've seen you do way worse and all this stuff. And so you find yourself just like, someone mentions, hey, this climb, it's cool. It's got a huge dyno, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. And so, those moves are, I mean, I love dynos. I love big dynamic movement, and it just so happens I really suck at it. It takes me a long time to memorize like how far away that hold is, or like.
Yeah. Well, you did several giant moves that I didn't do tonight. So.
I mean, by the skin of my teeth.
So what? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're still doing them. And I think it's cool that you can pull the trigger that way. Because I imagine it takes a little extra to pull the trigger. When you don't really know what you're launching for.
There's definitely like a leap of faith, I would say there. Yeah. Especially like in competition setting, like my collar, I'm like fully trusting that my guide is going to tell me exactly where to go, especially if there's not so many big moves in adaptive climbing, because they try and cater to people that, maybe their collar isn't the best, or like maybe these bigger moves are more difficult, which they inherently are for blind people.
Right. Sure.
But so you're not going to find like these crazy horizontal dynos and like these 1-2 moves or anything like that. It's all pretty sloth climbing and pretty chill.
So do you spend any time specifically working on like locking off and, spending a lot of time on small holds, or is it just something that built up over time and you become good at it?
Yeah, honestly, it just kind of like was already there.
Yeah.
Which I think honestly, a lot of blind climbers and a lot of maybe even adaptive climbers, that's like something that's lacking for them, because they find success in, I'm not going to say all adaptive climbers are this way, but I'd say like most new adaptive climbers find success easy in TR or like top roping and stuff like that.
Right.
And so they kind of stick to what they know and what they, I guess this is like true for any climber.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's why I don't like big giant moves, because I've stuck to what I know for so long.
Yeah. And I'm guilty of the same thing. And so I find that especially, and you notice, or at least I've noticed a lot of my peers in these adaptive leagues and other adaptive climbers, that they don't have the same lock off strength that I do, or a lot of the same like taking small hold ability, or the same contact strength, because they don't like that stuff. It's not enjoyable to do. But I just eat it up. So I find that I do, progress so much faster because, it's my style. It's what I enjoy doing. But because I'm using it in a way like most bouldering and like moon board or tension board climbing, it just like developed a lot quicker. Yeah. And so I think it's really important for, not only more climbers to boulder for sport, but specifically for like adaptive climbers to spend a lot of time bouldering, especially blind climbers, because you'll get so much stronger.
Yeah.
Pausing on these small holds.
So blind climbers bouldering, what's the fall like? How do you judge where the landing is? I mean, and this, maybe this is a stupid question. I mean,
no, for sure. I mean, I guess I never thought about it originally getting into it. I was just like, you got to fall. Okay. You know? But I think that was just part of my childhood being like, no one really gave a shit that I was blind, you know?
Yeah.
Not that it was,
they didn't make it a big spectacle that,
right.
you know, that
yeah,
you were.
There was a change. Justin went blind. So what? You're still going to come ride bikes, right?
Right.
And so I was always accustomed to just like taking hard falls or learning by mistake. You know, I've always been that way. And so
I think as a BMX rider, you kind of have to be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, specifically like running into the back of parked cars and stuff like that. You're just like, oh man, I'm not going to do that again, or try not to. And so, you know, falling is kind of among the same thing, you know, is if you come off of a boulder, you just wait for the fall. You just wait for the ground to show up. And so in some ways it's almost lended itself to being safer of a fall, because I don't get all tensed up, you know, when I'm falling. I'm like, look at the ground and then get tensed and then prepare for it. It's kind of just like limp noodle falling in the air until you hit the ground, and then you go feet, you know, your feet buckle and then you land on your ass and then to your back. And so it's not like super bad.
And then I imagine, you know, back to the reliance on partners. I know you've spent some time up in the park.
Yeah.
And for me, being able to see the landings up there.
Oh, the landings are terrible. They're so bad.
I've only bouldered up in the park a day or 2 days.
Yeah.
And adjusting to the landings after climbing in the southeast, where the landings are all perfectly flat and
super cush.
You just lay down a huge stage of pads and everything's great.
Yeah, you have a nice gym floor.
Yeah, in the park it's horrible. So
there's like jumbled talus and you're trying to like arrange the pads in some sort of way to make it work.
Yeah, does that ever get into your head, knowing that the landings are worse?
Oh yeah, especially at places like Lincoln, where it's just talus and like big blocks behind you.
Yeah, that was my first day bouldering at altitude. Was in Lincoln.
In Lincoln, dang,
and it was bad.
And the approach probably kicked your ass.
The approach,
super bad. I'd say like
coming out wrecked me.
Coming out's always the worst. Absolutely. Yeah, almost like, especially like because it is all talus, I use trekking poles like Hanes. And so my trekking poles are constantly falling into these holes of talus. Oh, and so it's hard to like feel the tops of the rocks and thinking like, okay, this is where I'm stepping. But instead I'm like post holing with my trekking poles and like stumbling around because, you know, carrying a bunch of pads and camera stuff. And so you're like, it's like quite the spectacle to just like watch me stumble around Lincoln. And then we even went out there with Carlo once and he was showing us around, and I just remember my friends being like, man, it's so hard to keep up with Carlo. Like he's literally hopping from boulder to boulder. And I'm like, wait up, you know?
Yeah. Wow. I didn't even think about the hiking through that shit.
Dude, it's definitely like, I've learned a lot from approaching, but it's also been hard because I have to adjust my legs so much that I've had like a little bit of an ankle issue, a knee issue on my right side from always adjusting my knees and ankles to these like oddly shaped pieces of rock. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But to get back to the falling question, I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like it's just trusting your spotters. Like I guess anybody would.
Yeah, totally.
You just like lay out the pad, set them up the best that you and your crew think that it's going to work. And then you're like, you guys got me as soon as you step off the ground.
Yeah.
And I know you talked about this once in one of your podcasts. I don't exactly remember who it was, but it's almost like as soon as you step off the ground on a sport climb, you got me, right?
Right.
Like,
make that decision before you leave the ground.
For sure.
And then you don't have to think about it up there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. That's cool.
It's kind of doubly, it's kind of like double for trusting your spotter and trusting that he's going to tell you where the holds are. And it's almost like more like confident boosting because you know he's engaged. Like I know like my friend Matt is always watching me.
Yep.
Because I know he has to watch me to tell me where the next hold is or the next sequence. So I know that if I come off, he's not paying attention to like some other thing.
Right.
He's like ready for me.
Yep. That's good to have for sure.
Yeah.
And it's good to have for a person with full sight as well, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
We need that too.
Yeah, I think
sure.
like anybody could learn like, and I know I hear a lot of people doing, you know, they don't necessarily call beta for them, but they're like, oh, you know, they're watching them all the time and telling them, okay, bite down here, dude, you know?
Yep.
And if you always have that person watching you, like,
yeah, knowing that person is just as engaged as you are is big.
Yeah, and it's tough, honestly, for me to climb nowadays with people that I think are a little bit less attentive.
Right.
Not that, you know, I'll still go climb with those people, but it's harder for me to trust someone like a big, tall block or something like that, where it's like, I need your utmost attention right now, dude.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's crazy. So when you're climbing outside, like for instance, today on the tension board, you could make out some of the holds because of their contrast and because of the grid pattern and all
that.
Yeah, it's
pretty ideal.
When you're outside, can you make out any of the holds or shapes?
Oh, man, that's a good question.
Or is it all movement?
It's pretty much movement, I'd say. There are some things that it's like pretty straightforward. Like Airwolf and Indian Creek, for instance, is a big pillar.
Right, you're slapping up
you just squeeze the whole way until you get to the last move, which I fell off of.
Oh, that thing is tall.
It's super tall. Yeah, and it was a big like dead point move to a side pulled jug, which is not a hard move, but I didn't know where it was, nor could I see where the chalk marks were for this thing.
Right.
Just like fell off the top of it, flying through the air, hoping it's like, when is the landing going to come up?
Oh,
you know?
Man.
But yeah, for the most part, it all blends in so well, especially here in the Colorado and at the park on granite, that stuff does not take chalk.
Right.
You could brush tons of chalk into it and it would just like, yeah, right, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And so, especially like some of the newer developed areas or places like Lincoln and stuff, like maybe in Emerald Lake, there might be more chalk on some grips, but.
So the chalk helps you sort of define where holds are. Gotcha.
Well, you know, I say that sometimes there's like all these different pieces of lichen or like different color structures in the rock. And so I might think that that's rock and I'll put my foot on a white, whatever it is, you know, piece of lichen or something. And there's nothing there. And I'm just like, oh, I thought that was the foot or something like that. But like in Arkansas or like even like at Joe's Valley where there's like really vividly colored rock with white chalk all over it. It's super nice.
Yeah.
But oftentimes I find that there could be like chalk all around the hold and only a little chalk on the hold because the hold could be small enough that people just slap to that area so much.
Right.
So it's not very accurate. It gives me just like a rough idea of where the next hold will be.
Yeah, and you're climbing at a pretty high level, so you're gonna encounter that kind of stuff a lot.
For sure.
Where there's a ton of chalk and a tiny little hole.
Oh yeah, all the time. Never fails.
Man.
So yeah, most of the time is all like pure memory, I'd say. And it's nice. I've kind of lend myself to climbing like kind of the shorter blocks. I love highball climbing, but it's harder for me to memorize. These things. So I ended up buying a ladder, like a telescoping ladder.
Yeah.
And I'll haul that thing out to the crag in my crash pad carrying like this close to 100-pound load. Once you like stuff the ladder inside the big pad and then stuff your camera in there and food and all your day stuff and humping it out there. And then when you finally get out there, you're just like, I'm glad I brought this thing because, you know, you're up high on this thing, able to figure everything out.
Yeah. And you can kind of memorize those positions just by going up, touching the holds, seeing where they are in relationship to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've only really been climbing for almost 3 years now, so not super long, but I kind of know for my body type, okay, if the foot's here and this hand's here and this other hand's here, then I'm going to be in this box.
Right. You're going to do this type of move.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and so like...
when you're visualizing that, when you touch a hold and you know a foot's here and you know the next hold is here, do you visualize yourself doing the move? Like, is that how that works?
No, I wouldn't say so. No, it's different. It's almost like a feeling. You know, I don't think about like, you know, I've never been able to see myself on a rock climb.
Right.
Or like, I mean, I can watch video like, okay. But I can't really see like what the small details of that looks like. So oftentimes if I know that I'm on like a right hand side pull and there's a right foot facing me, I know what that feeling is like.
Yeah.
And so it all kind of like wavers on feeling for me.
Yeah. You said that today when we encountered a move, you were like, I don't really know this feeling yet.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it's
And
almost computer in that sort of way.
Yeah.
It's like I haven't downloaded that movie. It's like Super Matrix.
Right. Right. And you wrote an article recently about Will and Roland's concept of POE, position over everything. Did you hear that first on the podcast, or
I did,
had you heard that before?
No, I haven't heard that before.
Cool.
Yeah, it was cool to hear that because I was telling you and Will earlier today. I always knew what that concept was.
Yeah.
But I had never had like a quantifiable like phrase or word for what was happening. Because we all encounter like the perfect way to do the rock climb and it feels easy.
Mm-hmm.
You could come up to a V5 and do it first try, and you're like, man, was that V5? That felt so hard because you broke the sequence and you like didn't use all the holds and stuff like that. But you can brute strength your way through a lot if you're like a fit person. But I can't really do that because I spend so much time pausing in between moves that I find myself needing to find every single perfect position.
Yeah.
And so whenever I heard that, I was just like, no way. Like that makes so much sense, and got really excited about it and started like thinking more like, okay, how can I start actually thinking about this more as opposed to just like, being kind of in my subconscious and using it that way.
Right.
So it's really interesting to like actually hear that.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. I had told people for years to not climb from hold to hold.
Yeah.
People tend to look for the next handhold or look for the next foothold or whatever. And I had tried to talk to people for years about don't climb from hold to hold, climb from position to position.
Right.
And let the hold dictate what position you're going to be
for sure.
in.
Yeah.
And the relationship between the holds.
Mm-hmm.
So having those guys put it into position over everything, just the whole POE concept.
Yeah, and it's kind of a catchy thing, so you can remember it pretty well.
Yeah, it made sense, and they're fun guys, so they make
absolutely.
it, they make it relatable.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is a really stupid question that just popped in my head a second ago. Do you call it on-sighting?
Yeah. Oh man. Blindsiding?
Blindsiding. Yeah. No sighting?
No sighting, yeah. All the sighting, less
We're
than
going
sighting.
to call this episode, Don't Call It an On-Site.
Yeah, for sure. I like it. But yeah, it's kind of funny you say that because I jokingly call if I do an FA, I'll be like FBA or first blind descent,
Right, yeah.
like FFA or something like that. Of course, it's kind of meaningless, but it's kind of funny just to be like FBA.
Yeah, several years ago, I blindfolded myself and climbed this V4 boulder problem that I had done 1,000,000 times, just to see how it felt. And it wasn't a whole lot different because I had the positions dialed in and I understood the positions.
Right.
But I also had the benefit of seeing it first and climbing it a bunch with sight. So it'd be really interesting, and I might do this when I get home. Try blindfolded,
for sure. Blindfolded
climbing,
on-sighting.
and not ever see the problem I'm trying.
Yeah. And I know
really
Paul Robinson talked a little bit about that. How when he first started rock climbing, he like superseded everybody in the gym and all the routes at the gym, so he had nothing left to do but come up with his own things. Or he talked about blindfolding himself just because he was like, I need another challenge, so I'm going to blindfold myself. And that's like, it was amazing to hear that, like, okay, well, no wonder he's like as strong as he is now, because man, what a way to like step it up a notch. I thought.
Interesting. So. Yeah, I had done it with crack climbing.
Yeah, crack climbing would be really, really fun. I mean, it is a lot of fun.
I had done it as a way to, when I touch a crack, start to understand what sizes it is and what jams it requires and what gear fits it just by size.
Yeah, like instead of looking down at your rack and being like, I think it's this.
Yeah. And just as a way to practice.
Yeah.
So, but I've never really tried it.
Yeah, I mean,
sport climbing or bouldering or in the gym or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to start noticing more things like microbeta and like especially when you're getting into the hard boulders or routes, like you're not just looking for like, okay, there's a flat edge there, because maybe that flat edge is piss and there's only like one way to take that edge. And so when you feel that hold, you're not just feeling the hold like at a gym, you know, it's just a hold, there's nothing more to it. But outside you can find all the subtleties. You can find all the pieces of grain that take your fingers in certain ways. You can find like the tiniest little divot that helps you grab this edge like a little bit better than you thought might be there. So you start noticing all these little subtleties more so than just like looking at a rock climb and thinking hold.
Right. Did you take that same sort of approach into BMX and all the other things that you did when you had sight?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I say that. I was more after I lost the vision. I think my world got like turned upside down, not only for the bad, but for the good.
Sure. And you hear that people who've lost one sense get heightened other senses. I don't know how true that is, or if that's something you can feel and tell a difference in.
What's funny, I was having that conversation on the way up here. We were talking about, or someone asked me the same question, and I was thinking like, I don't know if my hearing's necessarily gotten any better, because oftentimes I'm like, what? I find myself like everybody else.
Yeah.
But I think the difference is I'm listening for everything. Like I'm noticing a lot more things than just like, I guess I just am more attentive, if that makes any sense. Like,
sure.
So like if I'm in a tent or like even just listening to rain, I don't just hear rain. I'm figuring out every single raindrop that's hitting every surface around me. I mean, it probably has gotten a
your
little better.
Awareness is super heightened.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent.
Yeah, you're like Spider-Man now.
Yeah, in some sort of way. Until I run into something, look really dumb.
No, I think that's really cool, having to climb by feel.
Yeah.
All the time.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun, I feel like in some ways I'm a little bit more lucky, because like I know a lot of people climb boulders specifically because they're beautiful. And I agree. Like,
yeah, I thought about this on the way here too. Like, have you ever been inspired? I mean, Airwolf is a perfect example.
Oh yeah.
Like, what caused you to want to go to that boulder?
Dude, I don't know. Like, I saw the video of Chris doing it. Yeah. And I was just like, I have to climb it, like, I don't care how hard it is. It could be V14 or 15. And I'm still going to go throw myself at that thing for a week or two. And then I finally got the chance to go. A buddy of mine and I were going to Joe's. Finally got the chance to go out that direction, and I hit up Connor Griffith and asked him, "Hey, dude, do you know where this thing is?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, it's really easy. You just go here and here." It's like, "Are you serious?" I always thought it was this mystical thing where you had to hike forever, and it was like, you had to pay the troll toll and whatever.
Right.
And so we get to Indian Creek, and it's just on the hill. I was like, this is actually happening.
So when you see a video, or when you see Airwolf in person, what we're seeing is this really striking bright orange double arete, huge
awesome pillar thing.
Yeah. And I assume that it helps because there's the contrast of the perpetually blue Indian Creek skies and the bright orange rock. And but what are you seeing in the video? Like, can you tell in a video that it's this striking feature, or does it?
I mean, I can tell for the most part. Like, in my house, I have a huge 27-inch monitor that I can zoom in on, and I can zoom to like letters are the size of like 3 or 4 inches.
Gotcha.
So I can zoom in really far, and I can, for the most part, pick out things that I want to do. It's easier for me to honestly like look at something on my computer than it is to like walk to the crag and like stand far back and like appreciate the beauty from afar, so to say.
Right.
But I mean, I can't really tell. I wouldn't be able to tell you like what the hold is like, or
right.
I'll just have to ask like, what does that hold look like in that video? I was like, does that look doable for me, or something like that?
Yeah. And when people are describing it, like your caller, for instance, when you're climbing in comps, how do they describe holds? Is it the same way every other climber talks? just typical beta that you hear out at the crag, or is it something different?
I mean, it's a little bit more specific, kind of towards just what me and my buddy Matt kind of like worked out. It's like the most streamlined version of, calling beta or whatever. And in competition, we're not actually allowed to call beta.
Right.
Like he couldn't tell me, use a heel hook or get a knee bar there, or like, these little subtleties that he could see that I might not be able to. But I mean, so it would be like, instead of using the time system or the clock system, I know a lot of climbers really enjoy using that, and it works well for them.
This hold is at 10 o'clock
kind
of thing.
And we do that occasionally, I think, like mostly when we're standing on the ground approaching a boulder or something like that. Like I'll ask what degree the hold itself is facing,
right,
or like what clock shape it is. And I did that a little bit with you, I think, today. But when we're climbing, it's like, especially like at these harder things, it needs to be as quick as possible, because I do have, an ample amount of strength, stamina, power, endurance, and stuff like that. But when it's at my limit, it has to be as quick as possible.
Sure.
And that happens a lot in on-site climbing, on like the World Cup and stuff like that. On no site climbing for sure. And so we'll do a lot of like left hand up and right, or like a cross. I guess we couldn't say cross, but like we try and like just make it as streamlined as possible.
So he can give you some information in a competition, just not beta.
Yeah, no beta. So it would be like your right foot is up by your knee, in, lower, up. It's like these little incremental changes. Oftentimes I can find, and I've done like a decent amount of route setting, and so I'll know kind of what the route setter was thinking, so to say.
Right.
Just because I kind of understand the process, and so thinking like, okay, well, the climb's putting me in this position, so I'm going to slap my foot over here, and oftentimes it's close enough that he'll be like, okay, good, but it's lower. Oh, you're almost there. Your heel, it's like next to your heel, and then I'll know exactly where it's going.
Yeah. And
this all happens very quickly, and it almost sounds frantic listening to my collar, but for me, it's like we're working really quickly to like get up this thing.
Sure. And I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but you keep saying things that lead me in other directions.
Yeah.
So when you, like at your home gym, I'm assuming there are multiple setters in your home gym. Do you learn their sort of library of movements the same way that you learn yours? Yeah,
I know, like my buddy Chris, for instance, loves underclings. And like he likes doing cross moves and stuff like that off these underclings, and likes really tricky beta. And there's more to it than just like, if I see a Chris line, I'm going to be like, well, there's more to it than what I'm looking at or what I'm feeling.
Right.
And so then I know like, okay, try it a little bit different. And oftentimes that's the way it works. Or like my buddy Armin, for instance, he likes setting really powerful moves off of like really tiny edges. And so, if someone tells me, an Armin climb is over here, then I'm going to be like, okay, cool. I know what that's like. And so I kind of bookmarking their styles as well. And like Matt, for instance, my guide too, he likes jumping and pinchy jumping moves and dynamic style climbing. And so like if he has set something, I'll know like, okay, I know what I'm getting into.
Yeah. Cool. So you said earlier that you sort of catalog movements and sort of delving into this world of POE, since now we have a term for it. And you've been thinking a little more about it. How does that cataloging work for you? Like, have you worked out a system in your head or something, or is it just sort of still this big one giant file drawer that you pull out of?
I mean, I think the latter, maybe.
Okay.
It's really hard to articulate like efficiently.
Sure. Yeah. I'm struggling through it with you.
Yeah. So. It's, I guess memory is a funny thing and how it works, because like I think my buddy Matt and I also had this conversation that we think about it so much, it becomes a long-term memory. And short-term memory you'll forget, because obviously it's short-term memory. But if you like are visualizing movement over and over and over again, or like do the rock climb over and over and over again, you'll start documenting it a lot more and it gets into your long-term memory.
Right.
And then you can just kind of pull it out of nowhere, kind of out of thin air in your head. And so I've gotten into the habit a lot of climbing, even if it's like a limit boulder for me, I'll do it again, or like I'll come back and do it again over and over, documenting these movements. And I think it's helped my climbing quite a bit.
Oh, I guarantee it.
Yeah.
You know, we use a drill a lot for most of our clients that we call perfect repeats. That
nice.
You know, you find a moderately difficult problem for you, and you just keep repeating it, trying to make it a little bit better each time, a little bit better each time, until it's as close to perfect as you think you can make it. You know, and one of the points of value in that I believe in is that you're really committing that, you know, that library of movement into your file.
Right.
You know, and next time you encounter these hold positions relative to each other, you'll know exactly what to do, and you'll be able to pull it out of that file perfectly.
For sure.
You know,
and I think one other thing that goes into that, like climbing something perfectly, is I hate hearing my feet hit the wall. Yeah. It's like a pet peeve of mine. And so like, I mean, it's kind of a joke that every time I say, "Oh, I heard your feet, you know, be quieter with your feet." If someone climbs something and I can't hear their feet, they're like, "Okay, Jay didn't hear my feet hit the wall. I must have climbed it well," or something like that. And I think that's also attributed a lot to, you know, my growth in climbing so quickly. Was I hated hearing that sound of, you know, or like I didn't want to tear up my shoes or what have you. But you climbing something perfectly also means like, I don't want anyone to hear me climb this thing.
Yeah. And I think you've been sort of forced into the harder part of that and kind of learned it by just because you had to. And that's the idea of moving from position to position and understanding that it's a game of positions rather than going from hold to hold to hold.
Right.
You know, and I think that's so tough for people to learn.
Right.
And I think doing problems over and over really hammers those positions in.
For sure.
You know, kind of forces them into their file folder.
Yeah.
Where most people would send a boulder problem and walk away. Yeah. And you hear people say it all the time.
You
like,
do.
I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
You know?
Or even like I'll hear friends say like, or they'll flash something and I'm struggling on it because I can't find the holds up top or whatever. But if you ask them, dude, how did you do that thing? They'll be, I have no idea.
Right.
I just like got into the flow state, knew where the holds were, somehow it worked.
Right.
Or maybe they did it by the skin of their teeth and somehow they got up it, but they don't remember it. But I could tell you exactly how I did the mob back in Fort Gibson, Oklahoma, you know, and like how to take the hold and all that jazz. So it's really interesting, like climbing with sighted friends versus, you know, me climbing, and we like are back and forth and like learning a lot from each other and stuff like that. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Is there some sort of, when you're working on a project and you spend some time falling off the third move, and then you spend some time falling off the fourth move, and then the fifth move, how projects go. Does it get, for you, I assume that it gets easier and easier and easier, just like it does for everyone else. Sure. Is there, explain that sort of flow to me, because it's all positional for you. It's all movement for you. And we still are relying a lot on, if I want to hit that little hold perfectly, I need to be looking at it. I need to not turn my head away when I go to the hold. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with Rodney Mullen. He's a skateboard wizard from way back in the day.
Yeah, maybe not.
And he talks a lot about moving his eyes to different places to make things work. Like instead of paying attention to the gap that he's going over, he moves his eyes, shifts his eyes to the landing, and then it works.
Well, you hear about that in slacklining too. They tell you to look at a point on the other side of the line as opposed to looking at the line, because then you start wobbling all over the place. But I can't do that. I suck at slacklining.
Exactly. Yeah. So how does that work for you when it's, and I know that it's all movement, but is there a way you've come up with to articulate or describe that sort of everything's flowing perfectly?
Yeah. Well, it's like, I almost feel like like it's almost like no rock climb outside is awkward, if that makes any sense.
That totally makes sense. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. There's awkward ways to do it.
Yeah.
But if you find the way to do it, it doesn't feel awkward.
Yeah.
Nor does it oftentimes seem painful. I mean, of course, sometimes there are those razor blade cramps that you're just like, oh shit, like I can't believe I'm doing this.
Yeah.
But I find that like I'm listening a lot more to the tendons in my arms and fingers and, the muscles, and like, does this move hurt? Or like, why does it hurt? Like, what am I doing wrong to make this hurt? Or like, what am I doing wrong that it doesn't feel flowy? Oftentimes, if I find that a rock climb feels super flowy, then I feel like I'm doing it right. Because, you just kind of like follow these patterns on the rock, or the way it kind of lended itself to work. And then like, doing the first, if we're going to like start at base one, you're doing the first move out of these bad holds to another bad hold. You eventually find that feeling of like, okay, it's working well now. Like
right,
at
that
first,
perfect path through space, the perfect position to end in and to finish in, or to start in and to finish in.
For sure. And like, you're not just going to like dead point snatch this hold. You need to like pull on, drop your knee. Like if you were going out of 2 underclings, you'll like drop your knee and like do this like circular motion with your hand, because you're so close to the rock, you can't just like snatch it. If you were to like snatch to it, you'd have to like lean back from the rock and like shoot up to it. And then if you snatch it, you're going to like jerk your head backwards. But if you like pull in really tight and do this like circular motion, then like, okay, this doesn't hurt anymore. It's not hard on this hand. There's all kinds.
So you're breaking all these moves down into all their little parts.
Every single little thing I can think of.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. And I think it's super important for people to learn. And that's, going way back to the beginning of this conversation, that's one of the things that you don't learn top roping in the gym.
For sure.
And oftentimes sport climbing in the gym.
Right.
It's so much easier to learn that bouldering when you can step off and really analyze what just happened, and then try to recreate those little things or make subtle little shifts to make moves work that didn't work before.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's funny because it's funny that oftentimes you hear boulderers say like, yeah, I've been bouldering for so long and now I'm going to sport climbing and I'm just stronger. Mm-hmm. And it's true that, if you spend so much time bouldering, and Tommy Caldwell says his favorite way to train for big wall stuff is bouldering. Mm-hmm. And I think it lends itself quite a bit to every other aspect of climbing, because you develop these like really strong fingers and you develop like a plethora of movement and all this stuff. But for me, I'm not just learning or I'm not just gaining strength and power. I'm like documenting all these moves, and I'll find them in routes, and then
your problem solving skills get exponentially better.
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially like in the non-sight style of climbing or on-site climbing.
I like non-sight. I like that. That's good.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Non-sight.
We need to post that to the IFSC.
Yeah, totally.
It's no longer on-site attempts, guys. No, but I think that it's helped tremendously, especially like maybe if Matt even forgot to mention something when he's calling, which he rarely does because he's really good at what he does. I'll just kind of know kind of intuitively that if I'm in this position, surely there's a foot over here somewhere.
Right.
Or, maybe I'll just like swipe my foot around in a circle for a couple times, and surely it can cost like a little bit of stamina, but I could find it. Maybe he's not focusing on that foot per se or something like that. And I'll end up finding it anyway, just because I've like, oh, I can see what the route setter might want here. Oh, sure enough.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting in that aspect.
Oh man, that's super cool. To unpack a little bit, something you said earlier when you said there are no awkward climbs outside.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And it's one of my big pet peeves in the gym is that I hear people constantly saying
all the time,
that's really awkward. That's really awkward, and it's down talking these problems.
Yeah.
And more often than not, the issue is that you just haven't found the way to do it.
Yeah.
everything you don't know how to do seems awkward.
For sure. And almost like is putting the route setter down, because surely they didn't, I mean, they
weren't trying to make
it.
a bad problem.
Yeah. And so, and I'm sure they had several people forerunning this thing of all different sizes thinking like, I didn't think it was awkward, but they of course knew how to do it. I guess is the thing.
Yeah. And I would encourage people, and I think I've said this on the podcast before, though I've got so many episodes waiting to go out that who knows if it's buried in one of those.
Right.
But I would use that as an opportunity. Every single time that comes out of your mouth, use it as an opportunity. Because I still say it like, whoa, that move was awkward.
Yeah, I'm guilty of it as well.
Let me see if I can find a way to make it not awkward.
Yeah.
Let me try to find what was intended or a way to make it flow or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity there. So if the next time any of you out there find the words "that was awkward" coming out of your mouth, reframe it, and just know that I'm gonna slap you across the face if I'm standing there.
Chris is looking for you.
So try to find the better way to do it. Try to find the flow in it.
And I also think that, I mean, to help even route setters, like if they have a new person on their team, don't just think of it like, oh, this person's new, he sucks. That's not any helpful. Like criticism it can be hard to hear sometimes, but I think it can be helpful for the public to, in those little suggestion boxes or whatever, talk about maybe it actually was awkward. Maybe this hold was designed for a more overhanging wall and the hold was sharp and maybe injurious.
Sure.
And then, put that in the suggestion box instead of just being like, it's too reachy, or
and have that conversation if you can.
Yeah.
If you know the setter, ask them, what did you intend here? Maybe they're intending a move that you don't know yet, that you haven't downloaded into your file.
Yeah, for sure.
And it would behoove you to learn that move.
Yeah, and then you're helping each other grow, and the community's growing, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, really I have a distinct memory, and I've probably talked about this on the podcast too. I'm going to run out of stories eventually.
Yeah, everyone's going to
start making shit
stories.
up. But I have this distinct memory of I was a traddy. I went to Joshua Tree with my friend Justin.
Oh yeah,
and we went bouldering, and he turned his foot and sort of front pointed into this crimp that was facing away from us.
Yeah.
And, kind of koala'd into the crimp with his foot. And I had never seen anyone do that, because in the gym, everyone just sets for, here's how you're going to step your foot on the hold, And I hadn't bouldered much outside, so I'd never encountered that situation.
Right.
And I got so excited when I saw him use his foot that way, because I'd never seen anyone use their foot that way.
Right, yeah.
And if it had been set in the gym and I saw that, I'd have been like, this setter's stupid. The foot's turned the wrong way.
What are you doing?
So I think use it as an opportunity. I think that's great. And it sounds like that's something you do all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think at our gym, I mean, Tulsa's got a pretty small rock climbing community, especially at our gym. We all know each other pretty well, and so it's easy for me to be like, this was awkward, and then run to somebody and be like, how'd you do this? Oftentimes, it's something I overlooked or didn't feel, something I haven't downloaded, or maybe it was actually awkward, like we were talking about, and thinking this hold wasn't right, or maybe if you turned it just a little bit, it would feel really good.
Yeah.
And so I think it just helps, each other grow, and helps oftentimes there's a little bit of animosity between route setters and the clients or the rock climbers, and I think it can help mend that in in a healthy way, as opposed to just hashing it out of who's stronger or whatever.
Right. Totally. So is there, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I already appreciate you making time out of your trip to do this.
Absolutely.
I'm stoked that it got to happen and that we got the session together. That was super fun.
Yeah, I got to come to Tension finally.
Yeah,
cool
sorts
place.
of things today, man. And is there a place people can find you online?
Yeah, you can find me at justinsalas.com. You can find me at Instagram at justinsalas93. Facebook, Justin Salas 93. Justin Salas. If you just there is another Justin Salas out there.
You were Art of Entropy for a while,
for a
right?
long time, yeah.
Yeah, because today I was trying to tag you in a post, and I was like, "Why is it not coming up?"
Yeah, for sure.
And then I just typed your name. I was like, "Oh."
I was having a lot of people telling me, "What is entropy?" And I'm like, "Oh, I that's a long story how we got
Explaining
to
it over
this.
and over.
Yeah, and so it ended up being easier, and I've noticed a little bit of like an influx of people like interested just by Googling Justin Salas, and it shows
Yeah.
up. But there's another Justin Salas out there who's an MMA fighter.
Oh, really?
He goes by J Bomb, and so I'm like, I want to meet this guy at some point, being like, you're a badass.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm sure
Super
he's going to
cool.
think you're a badass. So,
Cool. Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, so cool, man. Thanks for sitting down with me. I
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely, Chris.
it. Yeah. That was really fun for me. It was really good to see, and not necessarily surprising, but it was good to sort of confirm that the way that we teach climbing here at Power Company Climbing are the same sort of processes that Justin uses in order to improve his climbing. And I feel like sight is something that we not only take for granted, but maybe we rely on far too much. And becoming a better climber in huge part is about understanding your body better and gaining a better kinesthetic awareness and a awareness of how your body moves and moves through space. And I just think that's huge, and it was really cool to see that that's what Justin goes through as well. So thanks to Justin for sitting down, taking time out, and thanks for coming over to Tension to climb with me. It was really cool to see your process and to be a part of it. I appreciate that. And thanks to the guys at Tension for letting us record over there, letting us session over there. Tension headquarters has essentially become Power Company headquarters Denver. For me, I've recorded, 4 or 5 episodes over there now. So super fun to go and see those guys, and I appreciate all their support. You can find Justin online at justinsalas.com. You should definitely go check him out. And Red Bull, if you're out there, Justin really wants to be a Red Bull climber. You guys should reach out. You got a good one there. So if any of you know any Red Bull people, hit them up. Send them this way. If you guys have not yet, sign up for our newsletter. Comes out in a little over a week. First one coming soon. I'm excited to see what Nate's got in there. I know a few things because I have my input, but I'm pretty much in the dark like the rest of you. So go sign up for that thing. You can go to powercompanyclimbing.com. There's a banner at the top of the page. You can sign up for the newsletter. I don't know what's in there. We'll see. And if you want to become a patron, if you want to help support the podcast, we try to do as much as we can over here. Maybe I do too much, but if you want to help support it, you can do that at patreon.com/powercompanypodcast. And for as little as $1 a month, up to whatever you think this thing is worth, please go over there and support. We appreciate that hugely. And the other thing you can do if you want to support is share this thing on your social media. Those shares, especially on Facebook, mean a ton. They mean a ton to us. And that just gets the word out. And the podcast is growing. We've seen big growth already this year. And I think that's great. For a niche little podcast like we are, to be putting up the numbers we are is impressive. But I'm looking for 1 million downloads this year. So I need your help. I need it big time. So thank you guys. Again, powercompanyclimbing.com. Find us on the social medias at Power Company Climbing, including on Pinterest, whatever that is. And one of these days I'll get around to figuring that out. And you can look for us on that Twitter machine. You're not going to find us on the Twitter machine because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
It's time to build.